Today, I'm taking you into a story filled with betrayal, deception, and complex interpersonal relationships. This tale recounts how a dream cruise trip for my wife Sarah and me turned into a marital disaster. We set off from Sydney, planning to sail along the west coast of Australia. But an unexpected hacking attack forced me to stay behind and deal with while Sarah and her best friend Margaret went on without me. What I thought was a minor issue quickly escalated into a dual crisis of finance and emotions. For many years, my wife, Sarah, and I dreamed of going on a cruise, but our jobs always got in the way. From our home in Sydney, we considered visiting the Pacific Islands, but ultimately opted for a 10-day cruise from Freeman along the west coast of Australia to tropical Darwin in the far north. The ship was scheduled to return to Asian waters in time for the peak tourist season and offered rates that were well within our budget when we were both able to take time off from work. Sarah is an office manager at a real estate agency and I'm probably a typical computer geek. Starting with computer games. As a teenager, I completed a university degree with an honors degree in computer science. After several years of working for a software company in the city, I started my own business, installing custom computer systems for various businesses from my home office. Our cruise schedule looked great: fly to Perth, board a ship in nearby Freeland, then head to Darwin with stops and shore visits at Geraldton, Exmouth and Broome. Our journey began in the cool winter, but we could look forward to warm tropical temperatures. As we headed north 2 days before leaving, my biggest client, called his logistics company, was my first major client. I developed all of their warehouse systems and automated invoicing and tracking software. What seemed like a minor problem had his own staff, Beth, so he asked me to look into it urgently. After assuring Sarah that I would be back in an hour or two, I discovered that the problem with my operating software was not a simple system glitch, but a hack from overseas. This disrupted the transit software, but the idea that the hackers were looking for profit and not just pranks made me look into their financial trail with a pale face. I stormed into my friend's office and laid out the problem. Priorities immediately shifted from repairing transit software to protecting the company's finances. It would take several days to resolve this problem, and if I had not with it immediately, large sums of money could have been stolen before we regained control. With a heavy heart, I called Sarah with the bad news. Her reaction was predictable and one she might later regret. But my options were limited. There was too much at stake. Returning home around midnight exhausted, I came up with a possible solution. If I gave my ticket to our best friend Margaret, a divorce currently between jobs, the girls could go on a cruise while I sorted out business at Ostend. Sarah reluctantly agreed with this decision. As I drove her to the airport, I kissed her goodbye wholeheartedly and told her to enjoy the cruise and have fun. Little did I know how literally she would take my words. Sarah promised to call me every day as long as she was within phone range, and after a long, tender kiss, we went our separate ways. The first call came from Freeland, just after Sarah had stowed her luggage in her cabin. "The ship is beautiful, Alex," she said enthusiastically. "The cabin is large and bright, with a window to the outside and large, comfortable beds for Margaret and me." I was encouraged by her enthusiasm and felt much better about returning to work to overcome the problems at Ostend. She called, began around midnight, and was obviously enjoying a drink or two. "I'm so sorry, Alex. I guess I forgot about the 2-hour difference. Margaret and I went into town to eat and we got back to the ship about an hour ago. We're leaving port in a few minutes. It's so exciting. But I really wish you were here with me. Thank you for letting Margot come. She deserves a good rest after her terrible year." I agreed to this, but due to work I excused self the next morning and slept soundly. The ship made the 200 journey to Geraldton in about 12 hours or so, arriving there just before noon. It was planned that he would stay there for 2 days with organized excursions in and around the city. Sarah didn't call until the ship left port and the passengers headed to the dining room for dinner. "Hi, honey. I know I promised to call you every day, but there's not much to tell. Today we went on a bus tour to a winery. Can you imagine they could grow grapevines here in this climate anyway? We're just leaving and we probably won't have any contact until we get to Exmouth, so I'll call you from there." When she ended the call, I realized that she said goodbye without her usual "love you." She also didn't mention Margaret Strange. A call from ex-Smith a few days later was even more subdued than the previous one. I can't talk for long, darling. She explained we're about to go out on one of the ship's boats to see the whale sharks man in line for the next group to go ashore. How's Margaret? I asked. She's fine and having fun. I don't think she's met anyone yet. But she's staying on board because she doesn't like traveling on small boats. So you're looking after her? Honey. She's a grown girl and quite capable of taking care of herself. Okay. I got to go. We're getting on board. I thought I heard her giggle before the call ended. The promised daily calls never materialized. But I finally found the source code that the hacker had installed on the OS RAN system. He got there after one of the youngest specialists opened an unwanted site on his work computer. He doesn't work there anymore. Meanwhile, according to the schedule, the ship was supposed to arrive at Brun. Having received no news from Sarah, I decided to call her. The call went to voicemail, so I left a message asking her to call me back when she could. On a whim, I decided to try calling Emily's phone. She answered the second ring after exchanging pleasantries. I asked how she was spending her time and how things were going with sharing a cabin with Sarah. Oh, she doesn't bother me at all. In fact, we hardly see each other, Margot replied. Realizing the consequences of her words, she nervously tried to take it back. I mean, I don't like leaving the ship. And Sarah went on all the bus tours and dives. I hung out by the pool and read a couple of books. Her voice faded. Okay. Emily, it was nice talking. Can you ask Sarah to call me when you see her? Of course. Alex. The time difference meant that the call came. Well, after midnight. Sarah sounded like she had been drinking. Are you testing me? Darling. She teased me with a playful giggle. This won't get you anywhere. I've been good. I've been taking care of Margaret. Like you said. But she doesn't want to go on field trips. JN is keeping an eye on me, so I don't get into trouble. John? I asked who the hell is John? It's just another passenger looking out for me. Darling. He's looking after me. Isn't that right? John. Her last remark was accompanied by a chuckle and I waited. Don't, John. I heard. Interrupted by another giggle. Having heard enough of her drunken mutterings, I disconnected and called Margaret again. Okay. Margaret. No half-truths. What's going on? Is Sarah with you? No, Alex. I'm sorry. But she's not here right now. Look, I don't want to come between you. I wish I had agreed to this cruise in the first place. Good night. I called back immediately. Now what she began irritably, who the hell is John? The guy she met on the first day of the cruise. I don't know who he is, and I barely saw Sarah enough to ask her about him. You don't discuss your day when you go to bed. That night, there was a long pause. Crap, I exploded. She didn't sleep in your cabin, did she? Alex, please don't jump to conclusions. It's just one of those things that happens on board, and I'm sure it's nothing serious and won't cause problems later. Just let her enjoy the rest of the cruise and share her joy when she comes home to you. No, Margaret, I really can't do that. Cheating is as unacceptable a reason for a breakup for me as it is for you. Do you remember how you felt when you found out that Dave had been cheating on you? I immediately regretted my comment. Emily was a moral, good and honest woman. She began to cry and I hastened to apologize. Margaret, you're a good woman. We've been friends for years. Hell, I've known you longer than I've known Sarah. If Sarah slept with that guy, we're done. I have no idea what I'll tell her when she gets home. Maybe she'll call me tomorrow when she's sober, and then we can try to find a way back. After I hung up the phone, my anger burst out. I slammed my fist on the kitchen table. It didn't hurt the table too much, but my arm didn't feel very good. Did Sarah really cheat? The evidence is clear. But even if she didn't sleep with this guy, her drunken comments on the phone look bad. Could I accept her behavior as a casual fling while traveling and take her back as if nothing had happened? As I contemplated this possibility, I realized that if she did sleep with another man, this would forever remain between us and would slowly destroy us until it eventually tore us apart. No, I needed proof of infidelity before I risked burning bridges. At first glance, things looked bad, but there was a possibility that nothing was happening. I had to be sure. I decided to take the initiative into my own hands and called Margaret at 9 in the evening. Given the time difference, Sarah should have woken up with a bad hangover. She was also supposed to be in the cabin she shares with Margaret. "Hi, Margaret," I began cheerfully when she answered the phone. "Can I talk to Sarah?" There was a short pause before she ventured to answer. "Sarah isn't around right now, but I'll see her in a few minutes. So can I ask her to call you?" "Did she sleep in her bed last night?" "Margaret, I think so, but I'm not sure. I went to bed early and fell asleep straight away. She could have come in later. It was weekend, she knew it. So her bed is now neatly made. But you're not sure if she slept in it?" I asked mockingly. "Please, Alex, leave it. The cruise will be over in a day or two and she'll be all yours. I appreciate your loyalty, Margaret, but you and I both know that if Sarah slept with that John guy, we're done. Please don't do anything stupid. Alex, I care about you both and I don't want to see anyone get hurt." "It may be too late for that," I replied gloomily. "Thank you, Margaret. Have a nice day." I ended the call and immediately dialed Sarah's number, knowing that, if she was awake at all, she was probably suffering from a severe hangover. "Hello." Sarah's voice sounded weak and trembling. Suddenly all I saw on the screen was the message "call ended." My wife hung up. I called back immediately and ended up going to her voicemail. "Sarah, if you want to stay married to me, call me back right away." My frustration grew in the silence that followed and I realized this was going nowhere. I needed a plan. I checked the ship's schedule to see when it was expected to arrive in Darwin and booked a flight to arrive there earlier in the day, as well as a return flight home a few hours later. I assumed it would carry passengers from Sydney from the ship. I was angry, hurt and confused. Sarah and I enjoyed a wonderful marriage together. I loved her very much and I thought that she loved me equally. If I had read the signals correctly and she really did get involved in a shipboard romance, was it worth ruining an otherwise idyllic relationship? Could I have met the ship in Darwin and brought back my prodigal wife, brushing aside her actions? I didn't want to play private detective, but I also didn't want to be easily recognized. So I bought a work shirt and pants, work boots and a regular baseball cap. Traders' clothing stores also sold safety glasses. Big, heavy sunglasses were just what I needed. With no plans to stay anywhere in Darwin, I packed a few personal care items into my briefcase along with my laptop and took an early morning flight from Mascot Airport to Darwin. 2 days later, I walked out to the terminal on a beautiful, warm morning and boarded a taxi to the city center, where I enjoyed a good breakfast. A few hours later, I joined the crowd on the pier to watch the passengers disembark. I noticed Margaret, but she was alone, carrying a small suitcase. The traffic dwindled to just a few people before I finally saw Sarah. She was dressed in a light floral summer dress and appeared with a guy whose hand was clearly caressing her bottom and her arm was possessively hugging his waist. The couple chatted animatedly at the foot of the ramp. She turned to him to say something, and they kissed passionately while he openly groped her in front of a group of passengers waiting to leave for the airport. "Get a room. You too," one of the passengers waiting on the bus shouted mockingly. With difficulty holding back, I considered the possibility of lunging at the man who was harassing my wife. He was about my height and weight, maybe a year or two younger, wearing a t-shirt, surf shorts and flip-flops, very stylish. Judging that the element of surprise was on my side, I assumed that I could probably defeat him. I've always been a logical thinker and hesitated long enough to think about the consequences. Did I really want to spend a day in a Darwin police cell accused of assault? Instead, I took a few deep breaths and pulled out my phone to videotape them kissing. I was sick of watching my once wonderful marriage fall apart. The taxi got me to the airport before the tour bus arrived, so I bought a newspaper, checked in and asked for a seat in the back of the plane. I took a seat in the corner of the waiting room, immersed in reading the newspaper, and mustered all my willpower not to rush towards the loving couple. When they eventually walked slowly into the room, completely engrossed in each other, I could stand naked in the middle of the room and they wouldn't notice. I waited until the last boarding call, lowered my cap slightly and made sure I was wearing my sunglasses. As I walked down the center aisle of the plane, I noticed Sarah and her lover wrapped in each other's arms. Emily sat a few rows behind them, next to the teenager. I didn't even have to worry about whether Sarah would notice me. She was completely absorbed in her companion. Emily looked up as I walked past, but if she recognized me, she didn't show it. I settled into my seat in the last row and, completely exhausted, closed my eyes trying to sleep. There was a rear toilet on the opposite side of the aisle, and half an hour after takeoff, I looked up to see my wife lover heading my way. He opened the door and walked inside, and I saw the busy light switch from green to red. Soon after, Sarah stood up from her seat and walked over to the toilet as I went back to reading the newspaper. It was only when she knocked on the toilet door that the flight attendant approached. "I'm afraid this toilet is occupied, ma'am," she said sternly, clearly understanding what Sarah was trying to achieve. "The front toilet is free, so you can go there, or, of course, you can wait here until it's free." She grinned at my wife. Sarah hurried back to her seat, blushing, her need for the toilet no longer seeming so urgent. I could hardly contain my laughter. The flight attendant, a beautiful woman in her 40s, I believe, stood in her seat until the guy came out. "Sorry, sir, but these amenities are only for one person at a time." She laughed at his confusion and turned to me whispering, "You'd be surprised how many passengers think it's cool to join the Mile High Club, but not on my shift." I answered her with a dazzling smile, suddenly feeling much better. Any doubts I had about staying in this regard disappeared, and instead of feeling sorry for myself, I began to think about what actions to take when I returned home. I didn't have any checked luggage, but I headed to baggage claim and waited for the lovebirds to show up. Margar was ahead of them and saw me as she approached. I put my index finger to my lips in the universal gesture of asking for silence. "Please don't tell Sarah you saw me. But ask her if she wants to go home with you, hinting that you'll take a taxi. I'll wait for you at the parking ticket machines on the second level. If Sarah prefers to take a taxi with her lover, come to me alone. But please don't tell her that you saw me. Let her make her own decision." Confused, she returned to the carousel to wait for her suitcase. When they finally arrived, the lover stood just behind Margaret, in an awkward display of public fondling. Her behavior irritated me because she should have expected me to come pick up both ladies upon arrival. Apparently she didn't care about being discovered. So I snapped a few shots of their intimate embrace with my phone, turned around and walked over to the ticket machines. Margaret came alone, dragging her suitcase behind. "Find her. Sarah is in a taxi with John," she said gloomily. "She pretended to be annoyed that you weren't here to meet us." Margaret. We both know she wanted to spend some more time with her lover, or her first move would have been to call me to find out why I was late. Hell, she didn't even call me or text me with her flight number. Please don't jump to conclusions, Alex. There were many fleeting romances on board during the voyage, and nine of them dissipated when the ship docked in Darwin. Why do you think Sarah and John are the exception? I noticed Sarah doesn't wear her rings. Do you think John even knows she has a husband? You don't know how close I came to physically attacking him when he kissed my wife as they left the ship. Emily shuddered. "Oh my God," she coped. "You were in Darwin. I thought I saw you when you were getting on the plane." But I dismissed it as impossible. "Alex, why, it's simple, Margaret. I thought I could intercept her as she left the ship and try to fix our relationship from there. What I didn't expect was to see some idiot, with his hand on my wife's ass, showing it off to everyone on the dock. The shock of what I saw destroyed all my good intentions. Seeing them hugging on the plane and in the baggage claim area did not touch me that much. It only strengthened my confidence that there was nothing left between us. Alex, I know it looks bad, but Sarah loves you. Please don't let this bad experience ruin life together. Little chance of going back," I said gloomily. "They've gone too far and you know it." We drove the rest of the way in silence. I helped Emily by carrying her suitcase to her front door, gave her a heartfelt kiss on the cheek, and turned to leave. "Goodbye, Alex. Please stay in touch. She really loves you now." Sarah arrived home for dinner, dragging her suitcase behind her and complaining that I didn't try to pick her up from the airport. She looked like she had been through a meat grinder. Her hair was a mess. Her cheeks were crimson. "I thought you'd call me with your flight details. I was ready to come down to pick you both up." "It's probably for the best," she began, "because our flight was delayed by several hours." "Really?" I said sympathetically. "Yes. We just landed here about and I was lucky that I was able to get a taxi right away. We left Margot on the way I clarified. Oh, Alex. You know what I mean, Margot and I stupid. So John wasn't with you. Then she turned a little pale but tried to laugh it off. John was on a different flight from Darwin. He was just a friend looking after me on the cruise. Nothing to worry about. You might have fooled me, my sweet cheater. If JN was on the other plane, then who was the guy you tried to join the Mile High Club with? She gasped, unable to answer. When I took out my phone holding it so she could see the airport photos, she burst into tears. If her tears were supposed to console my anger, it didn't work. So not only did you cheat on me on the sea, you also lied about it. Even worse, you left our friend Margaret, who went on this cruise to keep you company. She was trying to keep your dirty secret. And maybe she would have succeeded if you spent even a little time in your bed. You even left her alone on the flight home from Darwin. With friends like that, she definitely doesn't need enemies. The tears turned into deep soul, tearing sobs interspersed with occasional screams. I'll sleep in my office tonight. You can have the bedroom tomorrow morning. I want you to pack your things and by noon tomorrow. I want you out of here and not just out of here. I want you out of my life. I have no place to go. She sobbed pitifully. Try knocking on John's door, I suggested in a helping tone. You seemed a very suitable match from where I sat. I cannot do it. Why? First of all, I have no idea where he lives. I have no feelings for him and, after all, his wife is unlikely to welcome me. Oh, this just keeps getting better and better. I quit you. Two cheaters really deserve each other. Maybe you should find his wife's phone number so I can send her some photos as souvenirs from your trip. My anger has subsided, but my resolve has not. I turned away in disgust, entered my office and slammed the door, locking it. A single overcrowded chair in the corner made for a meager sleeping space and there were no blankets. Looks like I'm in for a long night. I only lasted until a few minutes after midnight. When the cold became unbearable, my back began to hurt and my bladder threatened to burst. I carefully opened the door to get a spare blanket from the linen closet and in the darkness I didn't notice my wife curled up just outside my office door with a loud curse. I tripped over it and crashed into the opposite wall, falling to the floor. You're a fool, I shouted at her. What the hell are you doing on the floor? I couldn't sleep. Alex, I needed to be close to you. Since you locked the door, this was as close as I could get. Will you come to bed now? Returning to my feet, I turned on the light and found a thick winter blanket in the closet. Returning to the office with it on my shoulder. Sarah didn't move, so I just stepped over her, slammed the door and locked it again. Please, Alex, she stammered as the door plunged her back into darkness. I resisted the impulse to tell her to go to hell, curled up in a chair and wrapping myself in a blanket, finally fell into an uneasy sleep. At dawn, sunlight streamed through my office window, as I awoke with an urgent need to relieve myself carefully. I opened the door, but Sarah was nowhere to be seen, so I relieved myself, shaved, brushed my teeth and spent a good 15 minutes enjoying a hot shower. I really didn't want another confrontation with Sarah, but I had no choice. All my belongings were in the closet adjacent to the bedroom, so with a towel on my hips, I headed there to face the music. Sarah was fast asleep, the blanket pulled under her chin, her hair scattered across the pillow. She seemed calm, so I quickly grabbed the necessary clothes and retreated back to the office to get dressed. As I sat down with my coffee and a piece of toast, the phone rang. I answered quickly, not wanting to wake Sarah. Good morning, Alex, Emily began in a tired voice. How are you holding up? Sarah called me late last night and, through hysterics, told me that you were kicking her out for lunch today. Is that true? She cheated, Margaret. Not only that, but when I confronted her yesterday, after she had clearly spent the entire day with her boyfriend, she blatantly lied. She had the chance to try to make amends, but she chose to lie. Without trust, Margaret, there can be no love, and without love there is no future for us. I will file for divorce this weekend. Yes, I want her out of here by noon today. You know she won't go away quietly. Alex, I don't care how she leaves, as long as she leaves. she'll want to stay with me. You know, it's your decision. Margaret, after she dumped you on the cruise, you should consider whether you want a liar under your roof. She works in real estate, so she definitely has enough contacts to find herself a place to stay. How are you? Alex, I can handle it. I'll be drowning in work. We'll need to decide how to divide our assets. It can be confusing, because we have a lot of joint credit cards and property in joint names. On the other hand, we don't have much equity in the house yet, so we'll have to sell it. Thank God we don't have kids to complicate matters. The conversation was interrupted when Sarah entered the room, looking very shabby. I won't leave, she declared decisively. Sorry. I said I wasn't leaving here. Alex, I paid my share of the mortgage and this house belongs to me as much as it belongs to you. So you have no right to kick me out. With Margaret still on the line, the conversation became awkward. Sorry, Margaret. I think we need to talk about this, so I'll call you back later. I thought about Sarah's outburst and realized she was probably right legally. I really had no right to require her to leave the house, which she also paid for. I hesitated for a moment, but then everything became clear. We don't have much equity in the house, so why would I fight for it? Okay, Sarah, I said much calmer than I felt. Stay. Is it true? She was surprised at my surrender. I turned away from her and went to my office, where I collected my laptop and hard drives and put them in my briefcase. I took the empty wine box out of the recycling bin and used it to store important files, placed the box and briefcase by the office door and then walked into the bedroom. I took Sarah's suitcase, which still contained all of her party clothes, and unceremoniously dumped the contents onto the bedroom floor. Then I packed a pair of pants, a few shirts, shoes and underwear, as well as toiletries from the bathroom. What are you doing, Alex? Sarah asked as she entered. I'm getting ready, you stay. I'm leaving. Quite simple, grow up. Alex. So I had a bit of romance on board. Did that take anything away from you? Of course not. If you weren't so paranoid and watching me all the time, we'd be happily in bed right now, making love. So stop this nonsense. Put your clothes back in the closet and at breakfast with me. You still don't understand, do you? Sarah, I started to get impatient. It's not that you had a brief affair during the cruise, but you completely excluded me from your thoughts. Remember, before leaving, you promised to call me every day. Is it any wonder that I began to worry about you? And what did you do with your supposed best friend? This is beyond all understanding. She, being a lonely woman, constantly faced harassment until she retired to what should have been your shared cabin and read books in the top of it all. When you finally broke up with your boyfriend to get home a few hours after your plane arrived, you looked like you'd spent the entire day having sex. Oh wait, you actually had sex all day. Whatever. I pulled the suitcase into the garage and threw it into the car, returned the briefcase and box of files and took the keys from the rack. This little last action seemed to make Sarah come out of her fantasy world. Alex. No, she screamed when I slammed the car door. I love you. Please don't leave. You know we can make things better. It didn't mean anything. Anyway, don't give up now. She was still screaming when I pulled out of the driveway, tears streaming down her cheeks. I think she may have finally realized that our marriage might be over. As far as I was concerned, it was over a couple of blocks from home. I stopped, tears in my eyes. Leaving early in the morning without knowing where I was going wasn't my best decision. I took out my phone, called a cheap motel on the main road into town and booked a room for the week. At least I could work in silence and calmly think about my next steps. The calls started long before I arrived at the motel. I left them unanswered. Text messages followed. I've always been a little introverted and didn't socialize much. I didn't really have a special friend with whom I could share my problems. I felt lonely, angry and incredibly sad. It became clear to me that, despite Sarah's terrible behavior on the cruise, I would still miss her. I also realized that loving a person cannot simply be turned off. I read that love and hate are similar emotions, but opposite. That may be true, but while I didn't feel love for her, I didn't feel hatred either. Just a terrible, deep sense of love loss. The following week I began the process of separating our bills. The lawyer. Funny how divorce lawyers call themselves family lawyers when they specialize in breaking up families. Began the divorce proceedings when I began separating our joint accounts and agreements. It wasn't difficult. It just took a lot of time and added to the sadness I felt inside. By the end of the week, I was an emotional wreck. Sitting isolated in a motel room with almost zero contact with the outside world was like what I imagined prison would be like. My feelings ranged from self-pity to fiasanga, to an all-encompassing sadness that would not go away. Sarah called constantly. Although I resisted the urge to block her number, I refused to accept her calls. She tried to call from her office, but I recognized the number when she called from a friend's phone, and I accepted the call. I ended the call as soon as she spoke. I deleted all her texts without reading them. Finally, Margot called. I hesitated for a moment but then accepted the call. "Hello, Alex," she began carefully. "How are you holding up?" "Great," I replied sarcastically. "Are you really living in a motel?" "Yes, it was a good opportunity to work hard without outside interference. And I don't have to talk to the woman who was once my wife. You know, she's suffering a lot." "Alex, it's not my problem. I'm glad she's suffering. It's her business, not mine. She can't keep the house on her own. She can't afford the mortgage payments. She should have thought about that before starting an affair on the ship." I talk to Sarah every day and she insists that she hasn't been in touch with John since she got home. And I believe her. "Alex, it was a simple but ill-considered romance on a cruise. It's already over. Sarah is full of remorse and doesn't know what to do to make things right. Because you won't talk to her or take her calls. It's too late. Margaret, after you broke up with Dave, you should know this better than anyone. How can I trust Sarah again after her deceit and lies? She's due to be served with divorce papers next week, and after that she can do whatever she wants with anyone. I don't hate her, Margot. I hate what she did to us. If there was a way to take it back, I wouldn't have thought she was capable of cheating 2 weeks ago. I didn't know her as well as I thought I did." Another lonely week passed and the incessant calls and text messages from Sarah continued. Then Margot called, expecting another round of mediation on behalf of Sarah. I was cautious, but she surprised me. "Alex, are you still living in that hotel?" "Yes, I am, but I'm looking for a small apartment near the city center." "Very good. I have to leave here within a week." "Why are you asking?" "Please don't be hostile to this. Alex, I have a house with 3 bedrooms. I only use one of them. Consider the possibility of living here with me and sharing the family expenses. Purely platonic relationship. I'm not suggesting any personal relationship. You need room. I have a room. I need extra income until I find another job." My spidey senses were on alert. "Have you discussed this proposal with Sarah?" I asked cautiously. "Of course not. I tried to help you make up and I reluctantly accept that it won't work. Although I talk to Sarah every day, we don't see each other in person that often, so there really shouldn't be any complications. Besides, I want to make it absolutely clear that this proposal to share a house is not a personal relationship. If she asks about your presence here, I will tell her the truth, but I do not intend to advertise your presence to her or anyone else." We chatted amiably for some time and agreed on important points such as rent and division of household expenses. I will use 1 bedroom for sleeping and the other for my home office. Sarah continued to bombard me with phone calls and text messages. I responded to several of her texts suggesting that she communicate through my lawyer. To Margaret, I learned that she was already having difficulty paying her mortgage and had arranged the sale of what had once been our home through the real estate agency where she worked. Her next request was predictable. She asked Margot if she could move in and split the costs. When Margot explained that she already had a lodger, the game was up. Sarah immediately assumed we were sleeping together and doubled down on her threats to call off the divorce and make my life miserable in every way possible. She also called her best friend. Words that shook Margaret to her core. It seems their friendship is on the verge of destruction. Margaret did not allow herself to be intimidated. "You're coming to dinner with me tonight," she announced one afternoon. "Where?" "Exactly. To the Chinese restaurant Golden Lion." "Really?" I asked. You know, this was Sarah's favorite restaurant. "What's the occasion?" "Oh, was it?" she answered naively. "There's no particular reason we should get out of here more often. I just want some good Chinese food. And they're the best in town. The feeling that something was happening continued to bother me. And indeed not even 5 minutes had passed after we sat down at the table and began to study the menu, when someone approached us. I stood up awkwardly, glaring at Margaret and making it clear that I didn't appreciate her tricks. But when she motioned for Sarah to sit down, I decided to remain silent, leaving the two women sitting on one side of the table and myself on the other. Under the circumstances, I did not want to sit next to my wife blushing with embarrassment. Margot explained herself. You two have found all sorts of reasons not to talk to each other. I decided to risk pissing you both off to at least get you two together long enough for you to talk. I know you'll behave yourself here, so I apologize if I've gone too far. Let's look at the menu while we enjoy a glass of wine and leave the discussion for later. Sarah nodded in my direction, and although she looked into my eyes, she did not try to speak. It was probably childish, but I immersed myself in the menu and ignored her presence. I didn't want to talk to her and was a little annoyed that Margot had set me up. The excellent wine calms us down. We ordered together, agreeing to share a few dishes, and dined in relative silence, neither of us wanting to address the elephant in the room. Finally, over a cup of Chinese tea, I broke out. Nice to see you, Sarah, I said. Ironically though, you look different, without a guy's tongue in your mouth, in full view of a busload of passengers. So this is how you're going to behave. She threw back. I better leave now. I told you it would be a waste of time. Margaret. Oh no, Sarah, don't go yet, I can say it better. Tell me, how did you feel when the flight attendant ruined your plans to join the Mile High Club? That must be one of the proudest moments of your vacation. Sarah's face lit up like a beacon. She was full of rage, but Emily was able to intervene before she could respond. Well, mine was in the thirst. You too. Could you at least stop acting like children and talk to each other without insults? We know you're still hurting, Alex, but at some point you're going to have to let it go and move forward with your life. Can we take a moment to ask Sarah what she would like to do next? Great suggestion, Margaret, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Come on, Sarah, where do you see the three of us in the future? She froze, trying to collect herself, and spoke in a barely audible whisper. I know I seriously screwed up. She began. I'm repeating what I told you both. I'm so sorry for you. Margot, we were supposed to have a wonderful cruise vacation together, and I was so caught up in myself that I didn't even notice that you were left alone in the cabin on the big part of the trip until I returned home. I had to be out of my mind to think that the affair on board the ship would go unnoticed. Now I see that the fact that I didn't call you as I promised was actually my mistake. If I had thought at least a little, I would not only have called from the ship more often, but I would have thought about my behavior a million times. How I could have been tempted so easily ill by guys since school. But no one of them did not get close to me. John was graceful. We first met in a cafe in Fremont before the ship departed, shared jokes and flirted a little. He complimented me so often that I began to believe some of his words well and quickly began to distance me from you. Margot, do you remember? On the first night of our short journey from Fremont to Geraldton, I left our room for a while. I went into John's cabin for a while, and although we didn't have sex, then it was obvious that it was inevitable. You know, he kept showering me with compliments right up until we broke up at the end of the cruise, and he made me do things I'd never even thought of before. But as a lover he turned out to be lousy, and I think I gave away my almost perfect marriage to a madly in love with. It still breaks my heart. Margaret, please be kind to him. He's the best thing that could ever happen to you. Thank you for a wonderful dinner, and thank you for listening. I need to go now. Tears streamed down her face as Sarah squeezed between the tables of surprised customers and disappeared before Margaret, or I could think of anything to say. Sarah's phone calls gradually became less frequent, and a new normal life began for me. The divorce was supposed to be finalized in 12 months, but was still not signed. Since I wasn't romantically involved, I was in no rush. When Margot finally found a secretarial job close to home, her stress levels decreased and she became a pleasant companion at home. We occasionally dined at a local restaurant but maintained a professional distance in all household matters. She's dating again, Alex, Margot announced one day. She called today for the first time in weeks to tell me she had met a handsome man who asked her out. She'll probably sign the divorce papers now, I muttered. But deep down I felt disappointed. Dare I admit that I don't like it? No matter how hard I tried, I could not shake the deep pain I felt after this revelation. The next day a new problem arose. Emily emerged from her room after dinner wearing a nightgown that left little to the imagination and a silk scarf draped over her shoulders. She walked towards the bar and poured us a glass of wine, flaunting her ample breasts as she leaned over to hand me my glass. Don't you like me? I know you're not dating. Tell me what I need to do to get your attention. Pausing to collect my thoughts, I continued as delicately as possible, knowing that this matter would not be resolved without consequences. Margaret, you are a very attractive woman and, of course, I have thought about starting a relationship despite our initial agreement. We have been close friends for many years, but we both know that a rebound romance is a bad idea, and the scar bars I carry from the breakup with Sarah are still a long way from healing. When you said yesterday that Sarah was dating again, I admit that I felt jealous for a moment. Within seconds, I had visions of Sarah and JN at the ramp and door when my jealousy turned to anger. I was so confused now that it would be crazy for you to get involved in a romantic relationship with me. Until I sort out my feelings. She closed the distance between us and sat on my lap, kissing my cheek. I understand. Alex, she whispered softly. Just know that I'm ready whenever you are, and if you need a little no strings attached relief, my bedroom door is always open, and you're welcome to come in. We sat like that for a long time, and I was surprised when I realized that the tears are my own. Reluctantly, I helped Marty off my lap, excused myself and retreated to the privacy of my room. I had a painful sleepless night with visions of Sarah in the arms of another man. Emily's beautiful, relaxed breasts in her loose pajamas, picnics with Sarah, lovemaking on our last vacation, all mixed up in a chaos of conflicting thoughts. After Margaret left for work the next morning, I made a decision staying at her house would inevitably lead to sex that could be harmful to both of us. So when she returned in the evening, I had dinner ready and a bottle of cha chilled and ready to pour. What's the matter, Alex? She smiled. No special occasion. You've done so much for me these past few months that I wanted to show my gratitude. Now let's enjoy dinner. After dinner was over, it was time for serious conversation. Margot, you have been incredibly generous to me. You have given me so much more than a place to live. You have given me your love and support where I needed it most. You know that I have feelings for you and say no to you. Last night was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. I'm still broken that Sarah threw away our marriage vows so carelessly. I had nightmares of her laughing at me while kissing the guy by the ship, and then I remembered some of the wonderful times we had together, our holidays, our time with her family, our picnics at the river. I miss those times, and I wish I could just rewind time and make sure this crazy cruise never happened. I thought we were the best couple in the world until she proved that we weren't. Margot, listen patiently. Without interfering with my speech last night showed us that if we don't change, we'll accidentally end up in a sexual relationship that neither of us is ready for. I care about you very much, Emily, but I'm afraid that our love for each other will change forever if we take this step. I looked at her, seeing a tear rolling down Emily's cheek. You're leaving, aren't you, Alex? She whispered quietly, her voice trembling. I need to go. Margaret, you need to move on with your life. And you can't do that while I'm here. I need to move on too. Because I can't spend my whole life hiding behind your apron. I was hoping we'd have a chance, she said thoughtfully. Although I said from the very beginning that our relationship would be purely platonic. We always had feelings for each other, even when we were children. I agree. It's true. Margaret, we've been best friends forever. Let's make sure we stay best friends without trying to be lovers for all the wrong reasons. I'm not going to try to stop you. If you want to leave, Alex, I'll miss you terribly. And I think you'll miss me a little too. It will also make my financial situation more difficult. But now that I have a stable job, I can handle it. Please think about me. Sometimes I felt like I had just kicked a defenseless puppy. Seeing Margaret in such distress was a terrible way to repay her for her support and generosity. Before things got any more emotional, we moved on to mundane tasks like washing up after dinner. unable to talk before quietly retreating to our rooms. During this time, my business grew much faster than I expected. It was convenient while I lived with Margaret, but I was surprised to realize that adding over 70 hours a week at work, I fell behind on my billing and it became increasingly difficult to serve my clients when they needed help. I posted an advertisement for an assistant and at the same time began looking for an office. They formed almost simultaneously. I found an old two-story building that was once a corner store just outside of town, with windows facing both streets. The original entrance to the store was bricked up to transform the retail space into a huge living room. There was a small kitchen on the ground floor, but the real living part of the building was on the second floor. It was perfect. I hired builders to convert the downstairs into 2 offices and a reception area, replacing the old windows with modern frames. The original entrance has been reopened and features a pair of classic lacquered wood doors with my name embossed net on the glass inserts in gold font. The whole alteration took almost 2 months, during which my stay with Margaret became increasingly intense. Hundreds of hopeful computer gurus responded to my ad for an assistant. My requirements were simple. I needed an assistant who could complement my skill set and who could connect with my clients. Finally, the list of candidates was narrowed down, but selecting the final 5 took forever until I responded to those who didn't make the cut and invited those selected to an interview at my new office. Just a day before we moved in a couple of used tables and chairs. The final choice turned out to be much easier than I feared. David surprised me on several counts. He was at least 5 years older than the other candidates. His long blonde hair was neatly pulled back into a ponytail and his clothes were casual but neat. It only took me a minute to realize its potential. He immediately understood the direction I was taking for my large clients and suggested several ideas of his own. We didn't bargain about the salary. He was much more interested in participating in real development. Excited about the progress of the past few weeks, I returned to my room at Margaret's one last time, furnishing the upper level of my office with new bedroom furniture and some basic items for the dining room and kitchen. Even though I had little time for anything other than work, I wondered what Sarah had been doing since we had dinner. I was sorry to leave Margot after all her generous help in making me whole again. I often thought about what life with Margot might be like. She and I were so compatible. We liked the same things and we had been best friends since childhood. We shared our deepest secrets, never judging each other and always being there when one of us needed support. We were young enough to start a family. But was our friendship love? Could we get married and grow old together? For the last night at Emily's house, she prepared a magnificent candlelit dinner, with all the delights waiting for me. We tried to keep the conversation light, but it was obvious that Margot was on the verge of a breakdown. Faced with the reality of my leaving her life and returning to loneliness, I helped her put away the dishes and we went into the living room to watch some mindless TV show. She sat next to me, resting her head on my shoulder, thanking her once again for the wonderful dinner and hospitality over the past months. I gently pulled away to leave for the night. Please, Elise, Alex, you really shouldn't have left, but I understand your reasons. Good night. Lying awake, looking at the ceiling, I heard Margot moving around. I heard her taking a shower and I was just beginning to fall asleep when my bedroom door opened. Margot's silhouette in the doorway was illuminated by the light from behind. Don't you dare say no to me tonight, Alex, she threatened. I deserve it and I need it. She resolutely walked towards my bed, threw back the blanket to crawl into me. She cried quietly, tears rolling down her face. Taking my face in her hands, she kissed me deeply. Love me tonight, please, Alex. I had already wrecked this girl too much. There was no chance of letting her down tonight. She needed love. I was here and I was going to give her what she asked of me. Thank you for last night, Alex. It was the best I've ever had. Tears flowed. If you ever want to come back, you know you're always welcome. Please don't be a stranger. Let's have dinner together sometimes. She quickly turned around and closed the door behind her, not allowing the tears to fall. I felt terrible as I dragged my suitcases up the driveway to my car and drove away. Was I crazy to leave Margaret when she was in love with me? In our new office, David was glued to his monitors as I hauled my suitcases through the door. If you don't mind, boss, I'm looking at the program you've outlined for Apex and would like to consider some changes. Give me an hour or so. David, I need to get these things upstairs and pour some coffee before I can think about turning on the computer. Would you like me to make you some coffee while I'm busy? Of course, boss. He smiled and returned to his screen. David's talent for complimenting my ideas was amazing. The changes he suggested for the Apex account were logical, easy to implement, and made the entire package much more intuitive. The Apex management team was delighted. It took us a few weeks to train their entire staff and fully implement the system. But once it was up and running, it required little to no support from us. With spread and business boomed over the next few months. My ability to innovate was perfectly complemented by David's ability to detail plans. Together, we made an invincible team. Late Friday afternoon, as we were wrapping up the week, a seductive voice came from the door. "Will you buy the girl a drink?" she said sexily. "Margot, what a pleasant surprise. Come in and look around. Oh, this is David, my business partner." David almost choked on his coffee. "When did I become a partner, boss?" He laughed. "Probably on the first day you started working with me. I just haven't announced it yet. Haven't worked out the details." Margot chimed in well. "Let me be the first to congratulate you, David." She walked around to his desk, leaned forward and kissed his cheek. He blushed with embarrassment. He looked nice. "Oh," she mocked. "The poor boy is embarrassed." David enjoyed being the center of attention. He was everything but shy and playfully wrapped his arm around Emily's waist, pulled her closer and kissed her back. Lips on lips. From my side, it seemed that he even penetrated a little with his tongue. I think this is cause for celebration. Jumping up from his chair, he took the stunned Margot by the hand and dragged her towards the door. "Where would you like to go for dinner?" He smiled. Emily looked at me for help, but I just laughed and shrugged for a moment. I felt jealous for a guy who always seemed quiet and shy. He acted quickly and I wasn't sure if the dinner invitation included me. But I followed them and locked the door. The little cafe around the corner was perfect. We enjoyed a few drinks and a light dinner. Small tables placed Margaret and David on one side and me on the other. We laughed a lot and the magnetism between them was immediately noticeable. I left to go back to my office apartment, watching as Emily and David headed in the other direction to get their cars. Seeing my colleague out of his shell tonight was inspiring. He was much more lively than usual and got along really well with Margaret. I was happy for them both and enjoyed my first night of deep, restful sleep in weeks. Although I expected a progress report to follow on Monday, an excited David called early Saturday morning as soon as I sat down with my first coffee of the day. "Hi Alex," he began cheerfully. "I need to talk to you. It can't wait until Monday. Are you free today?" I invited him to lunch to share the pizza that had been delivered moments before he arrived. I couldn't sleep. "Alex," he said excitedly, "are you serious about partnership?" "Sure. Seriously. I've drawn up an informal agreement for you to own 10 of the partnership, with the option to increase that share to 50 over the next 5 years. If we both agree, you're investing through a pay cut so you don't have to take on duty. This is my dream. Alex, no one has ever trusted me enough to give me the freedom to develop ideas the way you do. I know I'm socially awkward and a bit of a nerd, but I also know that I have a great sense of detail. With your talent and my technical ability, together we can build this business and seriously disturb the big players." I smiled at his obvious enthusiasm. "I'm not too worried about the big players, David. I've built up a good portfolio of loyal clients and pride myself on my ability to listen to their needs to build software accordingly. They know that if they have a problem, I'll drop everything to help them get back on track." Damn. It was this work ethic that ruined my marriage. I think we were supposed to go on a cruise, but I had to cancel at the last minute to fix a major programming problem. By the time I solved it, the ship had already sailed and my marriage went with him. "I'm sorry, boss." Emily briefly mentioned the cruise last night but didn't go into detail. She also said that you lived at her house for a while. She loves you very much. "Alex, is there something between you?" "Oh, what should I know? I've known Emily since we were in elementary school. We've been best friends forever. Yes, she offered me a place to live after my marriage fell apart. Is there something between us?" If you mean, do I want to spend the rest of my life in her bed? Then no. If you mean, do I love her and will I protect her? Then, hell, yes, I would die for this girl. But we are good friends and that's all we'll ever get. Then, would you mind if I tried to court her? We only spent a couple of hours together last night. But she made me feel special. Alex, I've never felt this way about a girl before. I want to get to know her better. But I don't want to come between you two. Go for it, David. I smiled at him. But know that if you hurt her, I will come after you. David ran back to his workstation, turned on his computer, and I didn't hear anything from him for several hours. I thought about his interest in Margaret and realized that, despite my relationship with her, they could really make a good couple. It brought up wistful images of my own relationship with Sarah. I really missed her. But those horrible images of her interacting with her lover and continued to me at this point. I couldn't even imagine starting a relationship. The weeks passed and I realized that David was not only as good as I thought, but much better. His programming skills were exceptional. But he surprised me with his ability to explain the complexities of his work to the client. His clear explanations were tailored to his needs, never revealing more than was necessary for his software to work effectively. He was right. The two of us formed a powerful team and many city companies began to pay attention to us. We didn't advertise, so all our new orders came from recommendations, although he didn't talk about it much. His relationship with Margot seemed to be blossoming. We're going to dinner tonight, boss, he announced one Friday afternoon. Why don't you join us? I had not seen Margaret for a long time and, having no other plans, I enthusiastically agreed. Things were different. When David and I arrived at the restaurant, sitting at the table with Margot was my wife, Sarah, about the last person on earth I would want to have dinner with. You set me up, I muttered through my teeth. Before reaching the table, David just smiled. His disarming smile threw back his tail in a defiant gesture and replied, boss, you would have to talk to her anyway. Why not now? In a nice restaurant. We won't let you get into physical assault. I walked over to Emily's seat and kissed her on the cheek, which allowed David to sit next to her, and gave me the last empty chair next to Sarah. She smiled at me with her most seductive smile, as I reluctantly withheld the kiss and sank into my seat with an exaggerated sigh. Since David sat across from me, it was easy for me to ignore my wife as I leaned forward at the table as the waitress brought us menus and took our drink orders. Conversation died down as we each studied our menus. David and Margaret broke the silence with whispers, seemingly agreeing on their choices. I also made my decision and returned the menu to the table. Not too carefully, Sarah handed her menu back to the waitress and ordered a Caesar salad before the poor girl could ask. After we placed our orders, the awkward silence returned. Margot was the first to break the deadlock. Damn it, she sighed. We're going to sit here in silence all night. So he, nodding in my direction, and show the whole restaurant how unpleasant it is to sit next to this lady. How is this kindergarten? Alex, let's at least enjoy dinner and leave for a while. Aside from your smart behavior, I felt like a little child being scolded by a teacher in elementary school. It worked. However, David started talking to Sarah and soon the conversation became general. It was clear that I could join or not. The choice was mine. By the end of the evening we, albeit with a stretch, talked quite friendly. So by the time dinner was over, we were all engaged in conversation, albeit with some tension. I made no effort to hide my displeasure that Emily and David had put me in this situation. The coffee was drunk. Emily and David said goodbye, leaving me to deal with my wife. Reluctantly, I drove her home in silence. She opened the car door and as she was getting out, she couldn't resist the last hour. I'm sorry, Alex. I don't know how many times I have to say this, but I'm really sorry we were good together and I ruined that in just 1 week. I'm not sure Margaret and I will ever be that close again, although she was a wonderful support for me. She arranged the meeting this evening and I know she will be bitterly disappointed that it was a failure. Thanks for driving me home. If you want to come over for a drink before you leave, I'd be glad. I don't know what else I can do to mend things between us, but I never stopped hoping that we could get back together, even despite our divorce. That's not going to happen. Sarah, it's time to move on. In 3 months, our divorce will be final and we'll be free from each other. Goodbye. I leaned over to close the car door, leaving it parked in the driveway, and accelerated. It's strange how things turn out. David was supposed to present a complex logistics induction system to a client for the day, but got stuck trying to debug a new program we had developed. I took charge of the induction, arriving at the company headquarters to meet with Chris Stapleton, managing director. Stapleton was a charming lady with sparkling eyes and a vibrant personality, who immediately put me at ease. We spent a busy day in her office room with key staff, as I explained to them the features of our program and how best to use it. The session was a huge success. So when we finally wrapped up, Chris asked me if I had any plans for dinner. The short story is that we were enjoying a quiet dinner together when I learned that she had gotten divorced several years ago after her husband's third infidelity. She lived alone in a prestigious area, had a full-time housekeeper who also acted as a cook. She swore that any future relationship with a man was unlikely. She loved her job, received a huge salary plus generous benefits, and was, as she said, completely happy with the way her life turned out. After endless questioning, she learned that my sad story, still officially married, but the divorce would be finalized in just 3 months. We were both so convinced by our encounter that neither of us saw the harm in social dinners. So our first dinner together quickly grew into 2 or 3 dinners a week and the occasional theater visit. It was a date to see Les Miserables on stage. That ended our innocent relationship. We had a private box at the side of the theater, and during intermission I noticed Sarah in the audience with Margaret. Neither of them noticed my presence until the lights came on after the final curtain. Emily smiled and waved, and Sarah simply nodded in acknowledgement. I saw an opportunity for some revenge. I could let Sarah know how I felt about Darwin. Chris had just gotten up from a seat, so I stood, put up with her, and gave her a silly hug, holding her tightly and kissing her deeply, holding her head to keep her from moving away over Chris's shoulder. I could see Sarah's face horrified at what she had seen. For a moment or two, she quickly covered her mouth with her hand and turned to Margaret for support. At that moment, Chris pulled away from me. "Damn it, Alex, we're in public." She then followed my gaze to the seats below and saw Emily and Sarah, who by this point was crying. "Oh, you sneaky bastard. Alex, I'm guessing that's your ex down there. So you were trying to use me to get revenge for old grudges. Well, to hell with you. Alex, take me home now." After a silent drive, I stopped the car in front of Chris's house and was about to open my door. "Don't go out, Alex. We won't see each other again. If a connection with your company is needed, let David handle it one day. You will pull your head out of your ass and realize that you still love your wife for your sake and hers. I hope you understand this before it's too late." My phone rang as soon as I walked through my front door a little later. "If you haven't broken it already, Alex, your little act tonight finished the job." Emily burst out. "You, of all people, should have known how painful it was for Sarah to see you kiss another woman so passionately. It was a mean, cheap trick. Alex, goodbye." I was going to tell her that it was good for Sarah to get a feel for her own medicine, but she had already ended the conversation. David was thoughtful the next morning and remained silent until we stopped for coffee. "I heard you got involved with one of our clients," he began accusingly. "Do you think it's wise to get intimate with clients? So Emily told you about last night?" "Huh, she didn't go into detail. But whatever you did, it hurt your wife very badly. At least that's what she said this time." There was no phone to end the call. "Damn it, David. It's time this woman got a taste of her own medicine now. Maybe she has an idea of what I felt when I saw her kissing in Darwin after the cruise. Our divorce will be final in a few weeks and then we will both be free to go our own way. She still hasn't been able to sell the house. I wonder if she realizes that she would have lost it already if I didn't cover the mortgage payments in secret to keep the bank away from her. She created this problem and now seems to be trying to convince everyone that she is a victim." "I don't take sides," Boss David said quietly. "It seems to me that for a guy who doesn't care about his marriage, you're showing a lot of signs that you're still very much in love with your soon-to-be ex-wife. Think about it. If you didn't care about her, why was there all this spectacle with Chris last night? Weren't you trying to get a reaction? Why bother with her mortgage payments? She dated a couple of times and came home unhappy, I'm told, except for that night with Margaret. Yes, she told me about it. You didn't date either with someone. Ever wonder why that is, Alex? David pushed his coffee cup away and returned to his computer screen, leaving me alone with my thoughts I couldn't work. I'll leave for a while, I muttered to David as I opened the door at the local park. I watched little children play with their mothers, soaked up the sunshine and tried to make sense of my confused thoughts. David and Chris were right. I realized not a day has passed since our separation without me thinking about Sarah. I missed her comfort in bed. I missed her words of encouragement when things were hard, but I also scolded her angrily when I remembered her trail, trying to erase all the positive moments. I wondered if, through counseling, we could put the ugliness of one fateful week behind us and move forward as lovers again. I was trying to make a decision. A few hours later, I took my phone out of my pocket and dialed Sarah's number. She answered immediately. Sorry, Jen, I mumbled. You didn't deserve the humiliation I inflicted on you last night. I went too far. No, you didn't go overboard. Alex, what happened last night finally made me feel a little bit what you must have felt. And it was deserved, I think. Are you alone now? Yes, Alex. I just got home from work. Pack enough to last a few days and stay with me. I have a spare room above the office and I can be at your place in 20 minutes. Are you kidding me? Would you like to come? I'll be standing at the end. Rents. In 15 minutes. Collected and ready. Sarah moved into Alex's house above the office, but she never used that spare room when David and Margot married. A few months later, Alex served as David's best man and a very pregnant Sarah became Margot's bridesmaid. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode of the story, please give it a like. And don't forget to subscribe to get notifications for updates.